I study Chinese literature.
Yeah.
But my decision to study that's not entirely unrelated to the Chinese martial arts. When I was in college, I was studying medieval history, so European medieval history. But one of my roommates was a guy from Hong Kong who did martial arts, and taught Tai Chi. And he just got me interested in China, which I never really thought about before. I mean, it was a part of the world that hadn't really been in my consciousness. I grew up in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So after I graduated from college, I was reading stuff about China just out of curiosity, and got more and more interested, and ended up auditing Chinese language classes just out of curiosity. And then that took me to Taiwan to learn more Chinese, and that was the slippery slope that led me to being a professor of Chinese literature.
All right, just start off, just since we're talking about Bruce Lee, how much influence do you think Hollywood has on the average American, like how they kind of view different groups?
Well, it's, first of all, you know, when you say Hollywood, what exactly do you mean? I think that Hollywood, in the sense of specifically the film industries that are located in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, that their presence is maybe not as strong as it once was, just because there's a much more diversified media scene these days. But if you want to use Hollywood as a kind of generalized reference to the media, then I think the influence is big. I think that a lot of how people in the U.S. and really around the world view the world and view other people is structured by what they get through Hollywood and other media. The flip side of it is that people are kind of savvy as media consumers. You know, people know that this is, a lot of it at least, is for show and to put on. So I don't think it's the case that people necessarily take literally everything that they see in media representations. But at the same time, it's like one of the main frameworks that structures how people understand the world.
Do you think Bruce Lee's filmography has like changed Caucasian Americans' or perception on Chinese people?
I would say yes. In a way, he created another stereotype. He created the stereotype of the kung fu fighter, you know, and this, now people think that, well, if they're Asian, they must know kung fu. That's almost a joke. But it was at least a new stereotype, and in some ways a more positive stereotype than the ones that had existed before. And he was very aware of that, of course. I mean, he was, having grown up in the U.S. and having tried to break into the U.S. television and film markets, he was very aware of the kind of roles that were typically given to Asian Americans, and he makes fun of those in his films. There's the one which is a Chinese Connection, where he disguises himself a couple of times, and the disguises are kind of like parodies of the kinds of roles that Asians would play in films. He plays a coolie, he plays an old man, he plays a kind of techie with big thick glasses breathing through his mouth. So he's very aware of the limits to the roles that were given to Asian Americans, and his own, almost I think his mission, as he saw it, of creating a different image of the Chinese male on screen.
So you're saying he's like kind of created new stereotypes in a way, but they're more positive than the predominant ones. What legacy do you think Bruce Lee's left on like martial arts, and do you think he is like responsible for the boom in martial arts studios around the country?
He's certainly partly responsible. There was, of course, Asian martial arts in the U.S. before Bruce Lee, but they were mostly channeled through the military. Up into the 50s and 60s, what you had was U.S. servicemen who had been serving in Korea and Japan, who were exposed to karate or taekwondo or whatever, brought it back, started teaching here. So it was mostly Japanese and Korean martial arts. It was mostly taught by ex-servicemen, mostly white, not by, you know, the nationals themselves. And it really was Bruce Lee who, he both was one of the first to in the U.S., one of the first Chinese teachers to start accepting non-Chinese students, but he also brought the Chinese martial arts to people's attention. You know, people thought about karate, they thought about judo, they thought about taekwondo, but the Chinese martial arts weren't really on people's horizon until he showed up. And then he also just popularized the martial arts in general, not just Chinese martial arts or his own style, but it became really cool.
Yeah.
And he kind of made a connection between the martial arts and the spirit of the 60s and the 70s that was appealing to a lot of young people.
Bruce harmonized Chinese culture with American culture through the creation of Jeet Kune Do and also the way he demonstrated on the screen. Bruce Lee brought Americans' attention not only to Chinese cultures but other Eastern Asian cultures, which had been relatively unrepresented in Hollywood before Bruce Lee. For Chinese Americans, Bruce created new stereotypes that were more positive than the predominant ones. Bruce was able to inspire and captivate the imagination of people from all places, which is a truly special thing.
You still think of yourself Chinese, or do you ever think of yourself as North American?
You know what I want to think of myself as a human being, because I mean I don't want to sound like as Confucius say, but under the sky, under the heaven, man, there is but one family. It just so happened, man, that people are different.